Hello and welcome to your deep dive Cancer full moon video special with me, astrologer Patrick Arundell. If you've yet to subscribe to my channel, I'd be honoured if you did so now. Please click or tap on the bell notification symbol. Also, with year 2021 just a few days away, please check out your personal horoscope forecast and character analysis combination in the link beneath this video. This enables you to understand what the coming year holds for you based on your time, date and place of birth, helping you to ascend way above your zodiac sign. Now, there is 30% off this. It is an offer, so please check out the link below. But also, if you'd like to stay with me, I'll give you your zodiac sign forecast for this full moon for the next 2 weeks at the end of this overview. And as usual, my overview doesn't just focus on the event itself, the full moon. I'm looking at where the other planets are set up at the exact moment the full moon occurs. So we almost have a day chart of this event. And that's really, really important because it broadens our awareness of what else is going along. So, of course, Cancer, a Cancer full moon means that the moon is in its home sign, it's in dignity, but it is opposed by the sign of Capricorn, where the moon is least happy. So this is an opportunity for us to be much more conscious of our emotional needs around shelter, around our security in general, but at the same time that Capricornian sun is asking us to be also balancing out the more practical way that we achieve this. And if something is out of kilter, out of alignment, the next couple of weeks offers us a great opportunity to work to resolve this. But of course, because we're bringing the curtain down on one year and welcoming in a new one, and after what has been such a brutal year, there is a lot more significance riding on this particular full moon event than perhaps there's been in the past. Now, if you look at the wheel on the screen, you'll see that Uranus is actually a major player on this particular event because it's in sextile with the moon, that's 60 degrees, very enabling, but it's in 120 degrees, a trine with the sun, and that's equally enabling. So the sun and Uranus are asking us at the moment to be very open-minded about how we manage our resources, or we use the resources we have. But because Capricorn is inherently a very risk-averse sign, it's very much about maintaining the status quo, Uranus is pushing the sun to be a bit more flamboyant, to step outside what we know and to try some different things. And because of COVID and so many people's incomes have been affected, I do feel that the entrepreneurial instinct that's been dormant in a lot of people can really be aroused on this particular full moon. What Cancer, the moon, is saying is that's good, but just always bear in mind the more emotional dimension of the situation. So as much as we may want to improve our material a lot through the sun in the sign of Capricorn, the moon is saying make sure it feels right, make sure that you're not risking everything in order to chase some kind of material dream, and we achieve that alignment, which is so important. Now, the other thing that's very key at this time is the fact that we do have a right angle between Mars and Pluto. This began on the 7th of December within 3 degrees, and it goes on until the 3rd of January. Now, Mars is actually in shadow and will be until about the 4th of January. On the 7th, it moves into the sign of Taurus, and then by the 18th and 19th of January, it's going alongside Uranus. And I think we could see at that time potentially some kind of earthquake, volcano, maybe a tsunami event is possible on the back of that combination. I'm not trying to be fearful, I'm just trying to give a practical observational forecast of what could happen. But at the moment, with Mars being in Aries, where of course it's the ruler, but being slow, and in that right angle with Pluto, we are talking about power. And what Mars in Aries is our desire to be free spirits, to be spontaneous, to live in the moment, to not think about things too deeply, to just act on impulse. Whereas Pluto in Capricorn is very much about the old way. It's about sometimes secretive bodies of power. So that can be governments, it could be in some ways the dark forces. And it's possible that, depending on your personal viewpoint, that you feel that your rights are being limited at the moment in an unjust way. On the other hand, you may be someone who is sticking to the rule but feels very frustrated about it. But there's no doubt about it that Mars squaring up with Pluto has definitely led to this spike in COVID cases, because a lot of people, much more libertarian minded, have thought, look, it only affects a certain amount of people, you can't stop the whole of society. And they've gone out and they've been living their lives freely, but of course, because it is such an infectious disease, it's much more infectious rather than in terms of the amount of fatalities we have. So it affects a lot of people, and it has had a big effect on the economy. And the economy in lots of ways is governed by Capricorn because it's about old money, old industries. So the fact that they're still in a right angle suggests that on this event, we're all still feeling pretty frustrated, quite frankly. Now, of course, we also have Saturn and Jupiter newly into the sign of Aquarius and broadly in a right angle with Uranus. If it was a natal chart, we would definitely be saying there was a right angle, a square of 90 degrees. In this particular day chart, it's there. And I think it's going to become much more powerful. I'm going to do a special on Saturn and Uranus because they are broadly in a right angle for the first 7 months of 2021. So this year is going to be a transition year. It's not going to be utopia, as some people are predicting. It's a transition between the way things were towards the way they're going to become for the longer term, and that will become much more underscored once Pluto moves into Aquarius, firstly in 23 briefly, and then fully from 24 for a longer period of time. Now, the other thing that influences this chart hugely, wheel coming back up on your screen now, is the fact that we have a T-square between Neptune, the North Node, and also Venus. Venus in Sagittarius is very much about how we want to just live our lives in the moment in a free way. And certainly by the end of the year, Venus inches forwards into a wonderful trine with Mars in the sign of Aries. And I think along with the Sagittarius solar eclipse, which occurred on the 14th of December, certainly if you're a fire sign or an air sign, this is very good news for your year 2021 prospects. But unfortunately at the moment, Neptune, which of course is a very enchanting, spiritual, kindly, sacrificing, magical influence, wonderful in the charts of those of us who are sensitives, as they used to say in the medieval period, people who have got very heightened awareness to atmospheres and situations that are not always tangible. Neptune can be a glorious asset. I have it conjunct Jupiter in my natal chart in the first house. However, here I feel that we may be encountering somebody who seems to be providing some kind of message which seems to give us some degree of hope. But I think we have to look at the small print here, because the right angle between Neptune and the North Node is the gravitational pull. It is also a lunar influence. The gravitational pull for us all is very much through to the end of 21 about raising our consciousness about the need to be sincere in communications, because it's in the sign of Gemini. So whether we write something on social media or something on a blog or on a message board or even to a friend, the more factual we can be, the more we're providing some healing to all this distortion and fake news that's been circulating so strongly over the last few years. But I think that this particular T-square points towards fake prophets, quite honestly, or it points towards someone that we may feel really is the bee's knees, but they may turn out to be the bee's bottom. So if you've just got to know somebody new, I would just hold off from being fully committed to the situation, because they may not be being deliberately deceptive, but there may be something about their history that they're not sharing with you at the present time. So in general, communication could take on some kind of illusory vibration. So just to break it down, this particular full moon is very much about balancing our desire for material security against the more emotional dynamic. Uranus is in the mix, which is asking us to change things up and be open to new ways of doing things, which we've all been forced to have to do over the last 9 months in particular. Mars and Pluto continue to battle it out, meaning that if we can in some ways control our desire to live in a very spontaneous, free way, where it may have some kind of impact on others, even if we're quite cynical about COVID, that is probably going to be a shrewd thing to do. If you're more convinced by COVID, this particular aspect may be you being more philosophical about the situation, but equally feeling frustrated about being penned in. And finally, we have Saturn and Jupiter, which are pointing towards a new dawn, a new consciousness, but it's early days in that journey. And then lastly, we have that T-square between Neptune, the North Node, and Venus, suggesting there could be some illusion going on. So with the full moon being in Cancer, all we can do is convert all this back to how it feels and let our instincts guide us. And if we're not sure, it's probably best to err on the side of caution, but at the same time, not let our daring do be pulverized by that, and that's where Uranus comes in. Now please stay with me as I give each of the overviews for each of the 12 zodiac signs. I will also provide a timestamp underneath this video. Thank you. Hello Aries. Over the last year, with the collection of energies in the sign of Capricorn, you've either reached a high point in a journey, or perhaps you've needed to think again. And this may have been profoundly frustrating if you didn't grab the golden prize that you really wanted. And that level of frustration may still be emanating around you at the current time. But of course, the moon in Cancer, which squares to your sun, could see you feeling maybe a little bit more inward, maybe a little bit overwhelmed by the situation. But remember, the location of Venus in Sagittarius, and as it inches towards the trine with Mars in your sign as the year comes to a close, it does give you an opportunity to trailblaze in the next year. And I do feel that you're going to be really sifting out around friendships, group associations, and your long-term future. You're going to be realigning. And at the moment, I feel this full moon represents a kind of a staging post, if you like, between the way that you were working towards, or the goals you did have, or the hopes you did have towards this new reality. And because you're not perhaps quite sure, it could be a little bit discombobulating. But keep the faith, because things are going to open up for you. And I think 2021 can be a really bright year for you. It's just coming to terms with the fact that you will need to balance your approach to money and resources and your principles. That's going to be quite a big theme throughout 2021 for you. Now Taurus, because Uranus in your sign is forging such a gorgeous alliance with the Sun, that part of the collection of energy in Capricorn in recent years, which has been pushing you to make a change, could seem all the more compelling at the present time, and you may be up for it. But if you need to discuss this with people around you, if you're really ready to embrace this change and they're not, that could be creating some tension. You may be thinking very carefully about a business matter or a property. And if you are thinking of investing, this is probably a time to be a bit more open-minded about how you can do things. But one of the great things about you is that you do look for tangible results. You're not easily impressed by bells and whistles. You want to see how it will work in reality. But I think there needs to be some big conversations over the next couple of weeks. And if you can keep the lines of communication open, I do feel that that can be very valuable. It's just that with Mars still in your 12th solar house, in that right angle with Pluto, is possible that some psychological stuff keeps washing in on you, making you feel a bit vulnerable at the present time. But it is all about moving forwards. Your knowledge, the knowledge you have in general, or the daring do that you're wanting to show now, is what's so exciting through this process. And once Mars moves into your sign on the 7th fully of January, you're going to start to really power forwards in a much more purposeful way. Now, Gemini, this particular full moon evokes the eclipse series, which has been so dominant over the last few years. And for you, there's been a lot around resources. And with the sun in the 8th house of your solar horoscope, it is really about weighing up the progress that you've made. There's probably been some challenges, quite frankly, or if you've really found the way to make it work for you, there may have been latterly some real inflows to your finances which have really pleased you. You are an air sign, and of course with Jupiter and Saturn moving into Aquarius, this gives you an opportunity to really work with your ideas. But that could include moving away from something that isn't quite working. So I think you're thinking very carefully about how you make it balance out in terms of your sense of security around money, or even your self-worth against what you have been doing. And I think something's changing. You want to do something in a bit of a different way. I've got my draconic sun in Gemini, and I can kind of feel this energy myself. I want to explore some different methodologies going forwards in terms of making sure that you can keep that balance between how you feel about yourself and also paying the bills. So a new dawn is coming through. Now, with Venus in your opposite sign, there could well be some love interest for you at the moment. Somebody that is making your pulse race. This could be someone you know through work, someone older, someone younger, and it could be really fabulous. But it's probably best just to let this play out a little bit more before you finally make your mind up on it. It's not to say you shouldn't see them, but just don't make any binding decisions at this stage. So Cancer, your overview for this next 2 weeks on the back of this full moon suggests that you really need to take into yourself your sense of majesty that comes from the moon. That means that you need to feel really at peace in your environment, but most of all at peace in your relationships. And yet Mars and Pluto in a right angle does not point towards peace. It points towards conflict. Now, it could be that all your relationships are running pretty well, and therefore you're not seeing that within your world. But it could be that someone's about to try and assert their power on you in an unjust way. Now, this could be an individual, it could be an authority, it could be an organisation, it could even be a government, quite frankly, because Pluto's very much about power. Who holds the power? Now, Mars is your chance to assert your needs and your boundaries. But Mars and Pluto in a right angle is very, very complex. It's possible that there can be an oscillation between you asserting what you want and someone feeling that's very forceful, or feeling that you're withdrawing. It just depends on how you deal with this, because generally speaking, Cancer people don't like conflict. It depends on your natal chart, because you may have other things there that actually help you in this situation. But a lot of Cancer people do scuttle away, scuttle down the beach like the crab and dig into the sand to avoid the conflict. But somehow or another, the last 5 or 6 months has seen some big challenges for you. You may have overcome a lot of them. And I just feel now you're really thinking about relationships a lot. And that can be the good ones as well. And you're trying to understand how it all fits together. And I do feel that that's going to be the theme for the next couple of weeks. But remember, with Jupiter and Saturn in your 8th house, that's very much about business. It's about where we're most closely or deeply invested. And it could also mean that you are thinking about some kind of partnership of some kind. Now, it could be a loose arrangement, it could be something that's more formal, but that may be giving you a sense of excitement and possibility for sure. But I think it's all about the terms of reference feeling balanced around all types of relationships. Now, Leo, With Saturn and Jupiter newly in the sign of Aquarius, the pinch point for you over the next couple of years is probably going to be around relationships. It depends how many planets you have in Leo, and it depends exactly where your sun is. For example, if you're right at the start of Leo, you're feeling this energy quite immediately now. So it may feel that other people are sort of asserting their needs towards you more than you've perhaps been used to. On the other hand, if you're later on, you may not be feeling this quite as much at the moment. It just depends. Often Venus and Mercury will be very close to the sun, but of course they could be in Cancer, they could be in Virgo. It just depends on where your sun is. But the general picture over the next couple of years is more focus on relationships. But because this full moon occurs in your more psychological sector, and the sun's in a more practical area, it could be a relationship linked to your work actually, which is giving you food for thought. And perhaps you're needing to think on your feet a little bit, or reach out to people, collaborate with people in order to maneuver forwards. Perhaps you've lost your job due to COVID and you're not quite sure of what your prospects are. With the sun forging an awesome trine to Uranus, it could be you need to try something completely different. Even hobbies, even if you're kind of retired or semi-retired, doing things that are completely different can be very rejuvenating for you. That sense that your personal freedom has really been curtailed over the last couple of years, it's still here because of Mars squaring with Pluto, but it is going to get easier on that regard. But I think you're being asked to collaborate more with others, and that means you won't necessarily have it all on your own terms. There has to be some give and take. That's the theme that's coming through for you. Now Virgo, obviously your ruling planet Mercury is awesomely important, and as this event occurs, it is at 14 degrees in Capricorn. It's fairly close to the sun. Again, if I was talking about a natal horoscope, I'd definitely say that this wasn't a very tight conjunction, but it is a conjunction. But in this chart, the combination of the sun in your 5th house of creativity and Uranus and that part of your scope that's to do with adventurism is pushing you to be much more passionate about the things that give you a spark, give you a sense of excitement. But then, ironically, Saturn and Jupiter are going to be really asking you to think about where you are investing in your routines, something that you have a great appetite for, and order and meticulousness. But I think they're going to be saying to you, if you're just going through the processes to make other people happy, you're providing a service, but it's not really making you very happy anymore. I think really what the moon in Cancer, which is about your future and about the way you connect to others, it's asking you to think again. And it's not necessarily easy because you like things to be so ordered, to break free and be a bit more avant-garde. But that's really what this full moon's asking you to do, just at a time when Jupiter and Saturn are really pinching the point of order in your situation. So that's going to create potential for tension, I feel. And that is going to be the case for the first 7 months of 21. So if you are doing something that just has completely lost its sense of satisfaction, you may have to go through a change in order to get to a place which is more fulfilling. And obviously that process, that change, can be a little bit sort of, you know, a bit lacking in structure and a bit lacking in the stability that you might really appreciate. But if you really feel you've got a lot more to offer, then I think this is the time to think again about how life is for you just now. Now Libra, now obviously the last 3, 4, well even since 2008, there's been so many pressures around home, family, emotions, setting your boundaries. Mars has been very good for you on the whole, I feel, over the last 6 months, even if it has caused some dramas. There may be more dramas in the next couple of weeks, even in the next 6 months, if you feel that other people aren't understanding how much you give, how thoughtful you are, how much you try to enable others. But Also, you need to consider, are you doing this too much? Do you need to firm up your boundaries? And I think because the moon's right at the top of your horoscope, however you're feeling at the moment, it's going to be very hard to disguise it. And because you like to be very dignified, you don't like conflict in an open way. It sort of almost makes you feel very unsettled. You find it distasteful, or rather disdaining. I think you're being pushed to set some real firm markers down. But Jupiter is in a glorious location for you at the current time, and Mars is still saying to you, look, what do you want from your relationships? If you're not getting it, you need to go for what you want. And that may mean tipping over something that gives you something. So it's an awkward one, but certainly you're moving into a much better time than you have experienced over the last few years. And Saturn and Jupiter moving into your 5th house is a staging point for you to start to manifest the things that really would give you delight and pleasure and joy. So if you're staying in something just to please someone else or to have some form of security, if that's what you want, great. But if it's not really feeding your soul, I think it's time to think again. Now, Scorpio. Now, of course, because your 2 ruling planets continue in mortal combat, stress, or at least tension, can be part of the dynamic, because it's the 3rd, 6th house, which can really make us feel on edge. And yet, this full moon, in lots of ways, it really gives you the opportunity to be much more open-minded. I'm not saying that you're not open-minded, but because you're a fixed sign, I'm a fixed sign, I've got loads of fixed, we like a degree of continuity. We don't necessarily like things to change unless we're really ready for them. But I think where you live, a close emotional relationship, if it's not working for you, I think there's a lot of talking to be done. It wouldn't surprise me if you're feeling a bit on edge, and if there's something that's gone stale in your life, you may be really thinking about changing it up. And Venus is in your sector of resources, and it is opposed by the North Node in your sector of longer term resources, and then we've got Neptune in between. Is there somebody that you're really fascinated with in a sexual way at the moment? If you are, ask yourself this single question. 1, can you chat openly with them and honestly? And 2, could you ever see yourself living with them? If you get yes to both those answers, seriously consider it. Sagittarius. Now, this lunation occurs across your 2nd and 8th house polar axis, which is a repeat of what we've been experiencing over the last 3 years or so. And I do feel that your finances are probably taking a bit of a battering at times, or at least your self-worth. Things are feeling much brighter. Venus in your sign, and also that wonderful solar eclipse in Sagittarius, are giving you much more sense of your vivaciousness and your attractiveness. And yeah, there could be someone around you at the moment. If you're not quite sure emotionally, that's because of Neptune's role. But with Saturn and Jupiter, your ruler, together in your 3rd house, keep the questions going, scrutinise, research, let somebody know you want to know all the details. You will get to where you need to be. Generally very bright for you, I feel. Now, Capricorn, of course, this full moon is in your opposite sign, so some astrologers may say it's relationships you need to focus on. Weirdly, I think this may be someone else holding you to account about your attitude to them. So you're on a journey to manifest your individual hopes, and this is being limited by the fact that there's the needs of the other person coming from the moon in Cancer, so opposite to you. Then because you've got Mars in your 4th house, that's making you potentially defensive, and you may be, even inadvertently, even not knowingly, maybe a bit sort of coiled in, and sort of like, yeah, there's a degree of, is there a degree of insecurity? You know, with Venus in your 12th house, are you unsure about how sincere someone is, or are you thinking that a relationship just isn't working? So the relationship thing can be there, but equally it can be there for someone else somehow. But with Saturn and Jupiter, Saturn your ruler, in your second house, you're probably thinking about how this works out for you financially. But if you want to be more creative, the Sun's trine to Uranus is terrific. And this really gives you an opportunity to go into the new year, trying different things. But I think there are some complex emotional and relating issues around you. And I think it just depends on your unique situation. You might actually be really fine in your personal relationship, but it might be around someone else you know, a friend, a family member, a neighbour. There's some niggle in there. But if there isn't that niggle for you personally, I think there is a real opportunity to get a bit more skilled at listening to what other people are saying and where they're coming from. Now, Aquarius, well, this is a repeat really of the tough stuff of the last 2 or 3 years. It's psychological. If you're an Aquarius who's, you know, a lot of Aquarius people are armchair psychologists and they're very good at working people out. Some Aquarius people can be very detached and not so conscious of the emotional dimension. And of course, Pluto and the mob, the posse as I've called them, have really been pushing the psychological agenda in Aquarius people's direction over the last couple of years, whether we like it or not. You're starting to see some light relief for that, but there's a kind of like a leftover. So this next couple of weeks could see you feeling a little bit frustrated. You may feel that people aren't really being open and honest. There's a sense of tension. It's not going at quite the pace you want. If you're transforming something around your home, that may be going slower than you want, but you're probably on the right track. But I do feel there's a sense of fraternity developing with certain individuals, which is really lifting you up. And generally, this is a new beginning and it's very hopeful for you. But this is a bit of a slice of the old stuff that us Aquarius people have been having over the last couple of years. Pisces, well, obviously the moon being in your 5th solar house is very much about joy, and the sun's in the part of your horoscope about your future. So it could be that if your future seems to be just going along, but it's not really much purpose in it, and you're not really feeling you're getting a lot out of it, you're trying to think about how you can change that. And because Mars is squaring up to Pluto, one of the hot topics for you could be about your values in relation to your direction of travel. So if your direction of travel isn't working for you, this may be a time to rethink. Also, with Venus right at the top of your horoscope, in an opposition to the North Node and T-square and Neptune in your sign, if you're not happy where you're living, weirdly, I think that's something that does need addressing. So if there's a lack of, say you live in a very remote location, or you live on your own, or you work from home, perhaps due to COVID, I really feel that that's going to be not so enjoyable at the present time. You want to have greater human contact, but it's not just the quantity, as we all know, it's the quality. And that's really what's being flagged from Saturn and Jupiter being in your 12th house. The next couple of years is going to teach you a lot. Even though you can have profound insights and you can be hugely compassionate, one of the most self-sacrificing of all people, sometimes you can go into the opposite dimension of that and be so sort of like stone cold, really. You remove yourself from situations and it's not good for you. So I would say this full moon is about joining in, knowing it won't always go right, but creating a greater sense of association. If, however, you're a very sociable Pisces and you don't recognize what I'm saying so much, I think you're going to need to have greater control over your time management. So that concludes each of the 12 zodiac signs for this Cancer full moon. Thank you so much for joining me. Wishing you all the best for year 2021. Stay safe, take care, and goodbye.